tonight we're going to do the buyer's guide. So Tim and John, you guys want to share the share deck, or I can share it? You guys want to walk the folks through it?
Welcome, everybody. We're very proud of this buyer's guide. We've been working on very hard, and as the saying goes, any of the good stuff that happens in this buyer's guide has a lot to do with the talent and the team. I mean, the bad stuff, belongs to me and Paul in terms of what goes on here. What we found really are a set of a couple of important implications for executives. So the first part is that the first question that people have been asking us as we deal with, is this real? There's some question of, we're just talking about, is this category going to settle down? And the answer, we think, first of all, there's no question the category is real, that we're seeing real applications. And the core notion is something we've shared with you before, is that it's especially important for the kind of work that's symbol work. And the way we describe that is it words, images, numbers, or sounds? And if the work is that, and if it is made up of those components, then it's absolutely getting transformed by AI in general, and generative AI in particular. And we think that that's not going to stop. We've seen the multimodal models coming along. We see folks going straight down into the technical stack. So we look at what's going on. That transformation is not going away. Second thing is it going to settle down soon? We don't think so. And there are a number of reasons for that. You see the pace of innovation is unbelievable and so forth. Another thing that's true is a lot of people lose perspective on how incredibly well-funded this is by the major cloud providers. So if you sum up the market capitalization of NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook, Meta, as of the end of October, that market capitalization was $10.1 trillion with a T. If you combine the gross domestic product of the third largest economy in the world, Japan, and the fourth largest economy in the world, Germany, it's 8.6 trillion. So that just gives you some perspective. In addition, people start talking about, it's so expensive at Microsoft, all that other stuff. Microsoft generates over $148 billion in EBITDA a year. That's $2 billion, about just under $2 billion in EBITDA a week. That is $400 million of EBITDA roughly per working day. They have plenty of dough. They're just going to continue to push this, and the cloud provider is going to be essential to this. So we think innovation is just going to continue to take off. Then you have the whole geopolitical situation where the Chinese are building some, the French are trying to build some, the Europeans, because they don't have a platform provider. So that's another second thing. Third thing is that we think that there's if you look at the case studies that we've gathered, both through our network and through this learning lab and through our conference and so forth, if you take the profit and loss statement of any organization, we think that there are things that you can hit, whether it's sales or customer service or HR or software development and so forth. You just take a profit and loss statement in a very practical way and walk through it. We have folks like John Spottiswoode, who is from Jerry Insurance. I think some of you saw him. He had a massive return on investment in a very short amount of time in customer service, and we think that's only going to go up. And all of the academic studies point to productivity anywhere from 10% to over 50%, depending upon the task. And that's just first order effects, right? That's not learning, investment, reinvention, reengineering, nothing. That's just, hey, teach you the tool, go do the stuff. This is what comes back. So I think that, the productivity implications are massive. When we start to look, and I'm going to turn over to Tim here in a minute, when we start to look at some of the patterns in the technical implementation and issues, there's no question in our mind that the large cloud providers are going to continue to invest and build out their ecosystem, whether it's Bedrock from Amazon or the whole set of investments that Microsoft's making. Apple's clearly trying to catch up in terms of its base. But the cloud providers, AWS, Google, Microsoft, no question. And then you look at folks like NVIDIA, they're actually vertically integrated. Everybody's vertically integrating into the chips. They might go all the way down into power, don't know, but definitely are building the models on top. And that set of systems is going to be important to corporations. And then in addition, you may have noticed they've assumed liability. So if you go to any of the major platform providers and you stay within their ecosystem, not the API calls for Microsoft, but if you're in the Azure an OpenAI system, then they will actually indemnify you from any IP claims. So they're using their massive balance sheet, which has over 150, well, I think it's about, depending on how you count it, about $200 billion in cash and marketable securities. Their balance sheet is protecting your corporation if you adopt with them. Then on the other side, you've got a very interesting set of issues around open source. Much of the stuff we're hearing is that it's hard to get the Llama models to have the performance of the OpenAI model. But we do hear some folks are able to do that. And you see, I think that the cell phone providers, Meta, and some of the Europeans are going to push hard on open source. So it's going to be an interesting discussion about, do I go to the closed, proprietary systems, offered by vendors, or do I start to go into open source? And for what reason? Do I do it to try to have more control, to not be locked in with them, and so forth? So we think that all of those are in play right now. And in terms of our emerging leaders, we've picked 10 of those, but let me stop there. Tim, Paul?
Yep. Paul, are you sharing your screen? Because I'm not seeing. Huh?
Am I? You guys not seeing it?
Nope.
I'm not seeing it.
I'm having a great presentation by myself.
Apparently.
It's great. I hope my
There we go.
I hope my voiceover. Yeah.
Excellent.
I always thought you were doing a great job, and I was really proud of
Well,
myself.
it's kind of embossed in this brain after all the times we've looked at this thing.
There we go.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, we see it now.
Okay.
We see it now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, one thing I didn't lay out is what the authority of voice is. So, we've talked to, first of all, thank you and the learning community for being part of this. And to paraphrase a one-time Secretary of State, it does take a village, to really stay up on this. We do think that there's going to be, because of all the dynamism, there's going to be a need for an ongoing learning community, and that learning community is going to have a combination of research, meetups, conversation, briefings, best practice sharing, and so forth. We had the opportunity to talk to a guy named Tom Monahan. Tom was chief executive. I know Tom a little bit, and I was talking to him about our effort here. And he was the guy who did the corporate executive board, which you may remember was a best practices and strategy company, which grew to about $900 million. Was purchased for $2.3 billion by Gartner Group back, I think, in 2015, if I remember right. Anyway, I was talking to Tom about what we're doing. He said, this is absolutely a market where best practices and community are going to rule, because so much is going on that both the technical side and the business side are going to want to get together to figure out what the heck's going on and share stories. So we've been fortunate with that. And, you saw, we talked to a number of vendors and lots of corporations and so forth. Here's the team. Vivian, Amanda, Adam, who's our late night. We've been torturing Adam because we mostly do it on early East Coast time. And of course, that's like midnight in Australia. Julio and Tim I've known for many years, and both deep, those three are deep technologists, along with Amanda. Vivian's been a great researcher, and then Paul and I, and we meet every day going over this material.
And John, can you share how we felt about the robots and that we collected?
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. So one of the core things we really want to try to design an AI native organization, a generative AI native organization. And it's certainly a fascination of mine. When I had the good fortune of teaching at Harvard Business School, and we taught the management information systems course, the main message that we had for senior executives is the important thing about information technology is it allows you to organize differently. It'll give you some competitive advantages if you invest correctly, and it allows you to organize differently. And so we're really interested in what kind of organization can we build when we're generative AI native. So if you break up our research process into ideation, early research, summarization, formatting, fact checking, what we call tone, attitude, tone, graphics, and publishing, we have a model where we say our thing is not what gets automated. Our thing is who's in front and for how long. So on the ideation, the people are in front, supported by the robots. For the early research, we go to the up-to-date robots, and we take that ideation and we search with the up-to-date robots, and then we supplement it with humans. Then when we look at fact-checking, summarization, robots in the lead, people are in support. When we go to fact-checking, people in the lead, robots in support. When we go to tone, We do people in the lead, robots in support. We've tried to, maybe Elon Musk's new robot will have interesting tone, but if we played around with things like, write this thing like Hunter Thompson or like Henry Miller, and it's very wooden. So tone really has to come from the humans right now. I think over time that will be different. Then when we go to graphics, still, even with the new DALL-E and Bing things, getting business graphics with text and images and so forth all together, really, it isn't there yet. So humans in the lead, robots in support, and then in publishing, it's really kind of a dual dialogue, because both in terms of who we go after and how we go after them and how we publish and follow up, still humans in the lead by a little bit. So we're constantly looking at what's the mix and who's in the lead. I assume that's what you want me to cover, Paul.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, and so we really think that any organization needs to do that. People talk about, is it automating beside or through? It's like, we think you have to break it down into the subtasks and then say, okay, this is the new form of re-engineering. When's the robot in front? When's the human in front? And then you hold the unit accountable, the full unit accountable for that. And we have, anyway, when you think about the risks. So business case, we talked about learning adoption. Now, this is a fast moving market, but we think there's going to be economies of scale and organizational capabilities that take time to build. So we think it's important to get started, especially if you're in a wins intensive business. Vendor market's massive. I talked to, the amount of dough. There's 27 billion already invested, but there's huge amounts behind. I mean, the scale of these things is, the guy, John Sherman of the Antitrust Act, his brother, I didn't realize, looking it up, is Tecumseh Sherman, who marched through Georgia in the Civil War. But, he said, look, we shouldn't, part of the Antitrust Act, those companies get big enough, they're going to be like governments. And I think we're getting there with Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and so forth. And I don't think there's any John Sherman or Teddy Roosevelt that's going to break them up. So they're going to keep going. And it's going to be really interesting for the Europeans, because they don't have a platform provider, and they are not going to want to be in the American models, especially for the defense contractors and banks and all that stuff. But they may have to be. In terms of scoring criteria, we picked out 10. So AI21 Labs, Aleph Alpha, that just got a new announcement of a major new funding, Amazon, Anthropic, Cohere, Custom GPT, Databricks, Google, Microsoft, and OpenAI. And this is the, a wide range, right? From no code solutions, very small, to the giants. And we think it's super important to understand what's going on with, among the giants, Godzilla and Mothra, for those of you who are Godzilla fans. Just to be really clear as to what we're covering here, we're not covering the ERPs who are everybody's got AI and generative AI in their product roadmap, right? Especially the big guys. So you look at that, and then it's not the specific solutions, whether it's customer service or marketing, like with Jasper and so forth, nor is it the folks in support of data or ML ops and other activities. It's really on the horizontal large models or large offerings, and that's our slice of the pie.
For the moment, I think, yes.
Yes.
Pardon me. Go ahead, Tim.
For the moment.
Yes. Oh, yeah. For a first. Oh, the other thing that's important is this report's going to get updated. So will be updated at least monthly, and then we really think of this as just a punctuation point in the ecosystem that we participate in. So we have the learning labs, the meetups, the conference, the research, the vendor conversations, and then we also do. We have a number of lighthouse customers that we're starting to basically help them in their AI, in their generative AI journey. So education, briefings, and so forth, and skill folks to transform their organizations. That's our ecosystem. And then the talent, also our relationships with academic institutions, Boston University, MIT, Harvard Business School right now are pretty deep for us, and we're going to expand those. Carnegie Mellon also. So here we've got the 27 vendors that we looked at. Wherever we did the best available evidence. We tried to get meetings with all of these. We were not successful because we're still, a nit on a gnat, who are you guys kind of thing. It's not like Gartner calling up. And so we rated them from the best outside information we get from secondary resources and any information we get from folks who are actually using products. And then when we did have the opportunity to interview them, we have a whole, methodology for how we do that, record it, codify it, and so forth.
Yeah, and I think one interesting thing is just like this community in an early market, it tends to be a little more friendly is the wrong word, but let's say approachable. So we actually did get meetings with a lot of pretty interesting folks that was surprising given how small a company we are. So we got a lot of interesting perspectives from really fairly important people, like some of the people who wrote the original attention paper, which really transformed and really created the large language models, made them possible. And some of the people who wrote the original RAG papers, which for the techies is the architecture that's becoming very popular, retrieval augmented generation. So,
right.
And they're founders, of course, of some of these companies. So it's pretty interesting to talk to a wide range of folks.
Yes, and so the folks who did the original work behind Alexa and so forth. So really, just because we didn't get everybody, we got some real depth. And the fun thing is that, we're talking to people who just got a couple $100 million funding round. They're like, what are you guys seeing? It's like, it's that early,
John, that's thing I would highlight for the audience. I mean, it's, between AI 21, Contextual, Minstrel, and Pyre and a few others, it was surprising to me how quickly they started asking us what they're seeing in the market because it's moving so fast and they were so focused on fundraising.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think there's those of us who have enough gray hair, we consistently say we've never seen a market move this fast, just never in all. And I was there in the early days of the internet, the early days of the Macintosh. They were, world-changing moments, but just not at this level of pace.
Yeah, that's the thing that's amazing. I mentioned the concentration of market capitalization and earning power. If you take a look, 80% of the total funding in this thing came through, Google and Microsoft's commitments to OpenAI and to Anthropic. So that's a lot. So, folks like Inflection AI get a measly 1.5 billion. I mean, the numbers here are just nutty. And the other thing that's interesting is that, with some of the vendors, like one of them in particular, one of the upstart vendors that has a mere, let's see, they have about a $400 million commitment. They're saying that they believe that the algorithms they're doing, these are folks who came from OpenAI and Meta, are over an order of magnitude more efficient. So that $400 million they think is going to be worth $4 billion in terms of building capacity. So we'll see, but there's unbelievable productivity improvements happening in the algorithms. There's massive competition among the cloud warriors in terms of what's going on here, and people making bets left and right.
I think this is where there was a question earlier about how fast is the market going to settle. So there are two ways of looking at it. One way is it's going to take a while because there's so much money and so many vendors and so many different things happening. And my own personal perspective is this surprised everybody, including OpenAI, how quickly it happened. And so there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, as John was just mentioning. There are possibilities for order of magnitude changes in performance that are just coming out now that could change the dynamics of the marketplace. On the other hand, Google, Microsoft, and AWS have such power and distribution and cash and balance sheet strength that they're likely to be the main channels. And at least my experience in talking to my executive buddies in large corporations is this is already happening with Microsoft in the lead. So Microsoft, anybody who wants OpenAI at a corporate level in any serious way is going through Microsoft. And so Microsoft pretty much owns OpenAI, may eventually purchase it, who knows? So OpenAI acts like they're independent, but they're already almost a captive vendor. Google has their Gemini model, but they're also cozying up to Anthropic and Cohere, and AWS is definitely cozying up to Anthropic and also building their own models. So it's really important, I think, to watch these three because they have so much power, particularly in the corporate marketplace, because they're so well established.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting, the battle between Microsoft and AWS on this. I think AWS is late to the party, but they're investing heavily. And
they have the most entrenched position from the prior generation. So they are a leader in general cloud services.
Absolutely. And the cool thing is, my experience, I bought a bunch of corporate services from Google. My experience is that they're not even in the same zip code as Microsoft and AWS in terms of understanding how to serve a corporate client. So I think it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very hard for Google's to really understand like what's going on there. But I think this is going to give, and is no mistake that Nadella came from Azure, right? He built up that business. And so I think, him using AI as the way to grab back the cloud from AWS, I think is absolutely conscious. IBM is, basically for this game is sitting in the stands. They just had a $500 million commitment for their investments in OpenAI. It's $500 million. If you pull apart IBM's profit and loss statement, they are having a hard time just keeping up with the R&D they need to do for their core. Meanwhile, Microsoft is kicking off $500 million a week. I mean, it's nuts. It's just not even close. So it's going to be an interesting battle. The criteria that we use are the ones that you can use in an early market from the outside in. So product innovation, quality of investors, strategic relationships, publicly available case studies, and customer references, and then strength and quality of team. Okay. So these are things that we can look at pretty well from the outside. Of course, there are many more things that you on the inside, like looking at the impact on your architecture, on your business process, on your talent pool, right? All those things aren't things that we can assess from the outside in an early market. So the folks who were the most interesting here were Databricks, Google, Cohere, Microsoft, Amazon, Anthropic, OpenAI, AI21 Labs, and Custom GPT, which is the only small.
Right. And Databricks is on the list because they purchased Mosaic ML.
Yes.
Which, again, these are the kinds of things you're going to see. Databricks is not at the scale or position of Microsoft, but they're not exactly tiny. They have very large presence, particularly in the machine learning and AI market. What we would at this point already call the old AI market, which is machine vision, natural language processing, sentiment extraction. It's been going on for a decade, and they are a leader in that space. And by purchasing Mosaic ML, they move themselves right into the forefront of this space. And now they have such tremendous distribution. Again, they have such a tremendous customer base. It makes them a force to be reckoned with, although again, it's sort of a second tier compared to a Microsoft or an Amazon.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think that actually Dave Edelman, another person, just came out with a recent Harvard Business Review article, I think, which is pretty smart, which is around, do you have data? I think we're going to see certain folks wake up and say, like there's one biopharma, for example, that I know has the most comprehensive panel of real world evidence of healthy people on a global basis, millions of people over dozens of years, that's current. And that value is not priced in their current stock price. But if you follow biopharma at all, real world evidence is a huge part of where their development efforts and their regulatory support is going. And given the enormous amount of money that biopharma has, that being able to make that real world evidence accessible as a strategic asset. Paul and I were at a multi-division it's an industrial company that sells snow removal and lawn equipment to municipalities. And it's a roll-up of a tremendous amount of family-run manufacturing firms, anywhere from like 50 million to about 200 million. It's a brilliant strategy. They just continue to have an appreciating stock price. They're out of Austin, just outside of Alamo, outside of the Alamo, San Antonio, Texas. And they have, in terms of maintenance, repair, customer service, they could dominate if they make that available to their in multiple languages, especially Spanish, Portuguese, Vietnamese, and English. In their served market. That's a huge data asset that they can light up with this in a way that they just couldn't afford to before. And then looking at the behavior and the context of interaction with that will tell them a lot about their product service needs. And a lot of their dough that they make is in after sales service. It's 20% of their P&L, 20% of their revenue is after sales service. They don't disclose it, but it's a disproportionate amount of their profitability is parts and after sales service. So if they can, on somebody's phone, they can pick up a phone and take a picture of what the problem is and get the result and order the part, that's worth all kinds of dough to them. So I
I
mean,
just wanna, excuse me, John, I want to just ask Julio and Adam and Vivian just to share what you guys thought was most memorable or surprising in the last 3 or 4 months of research, and then we'll open up the questions. Adam, you want to start, and then we'll go to Julio?
Most memorable or surprising?
Surprising, maybe surprising is better. Did you learn anything the last 4 months we were digging through this? And what surprised you?
Honestly, I guess because of where I sit with the technology, often what's surprising me is the reality of how slowly this is actually going to get implemented. Just in terms of both the growth and the maturity of the technology, like people are, like we were talking about, I was looking at custom GPT being on this list, and I was thinking about what's coming out with the way GPT is, OpenAI is letting you do it yourself, and I'm realizing exactly as I saw in the comments as well. But that's not enterprise ready, right? That's a sandbox, and it's great if you want to sort of mock something up or figure out how it works. But there isn't a company out there that's going to roll out like an enterprise thing like that, where it's just one person on a little chat box that maybe the AI decides to change the logic behind on its own. Like it's just still so early, and there's going to be a lot of growth and maturity into 2024 where people start realizing they need 2025 budgets. Like this is, it feels like on an individual level, this thing's turning upside down on its head overnight. But when you look at the scope and scale of a guide like this, when I do, and over the last 3 months, I certainly realize what a massive obstacle this really is for enterprise to tackle.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Julio, what surprised you?
Well, I don't know about surprise, but as a technologist, I've always been like really focused on all the technology kind of aspects of it and all the advancements and how quickly that's going and how amazing that is. But I'm also been really, really interested in the kind of the strategic moves of the big players, of the really big players, and how, like John said, Microsoft owns GitHub and Copilot. It's probably like the most used LLM out there. It is used everywhere by every developer out there, and that is like such a big piece of it. And then they own whatever, half or almost a little bit less than half of OpenAI, and that's a huge strategic kind of asset. And I wouldn't be surprised if they make a play to buy the rest of it and bring that into Microsoft. And then I'm kind of wondering what else would they own? Would they like try to get control over Hugging Face or something else? I don't know what else they're going to do, but I'm just fascinated by all the different like high level strategic moves that the companies are making. And then what will Google do in response, and what will AWS do? They are an entrenched provider for a platform, but they're not necessarily like leading or have a really good position in this generative AI race. So I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen there also.
Yeah. Before we open up questions here, Vivian, you want to share what you surprised you the most?
Yes, I think for me, what surprised me the most is the rate at which things progressed. I mean, for example, even in the middle of doing the guide, Amazon launched Bedrock. I think if you're thinking about it, the rate at which things moves, it's so fast that, as John said, we have to update the guide almost monthly, right? Considering what comes out.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sorry?
In fact, you can really, not only did Amazon launch Bedrock, they committed $4 billion of investment to Anthropic and started Olympus, their own LLM model, all in just a couple of months, really.
Exactly. And how I think about it is 1 month ago, if, within the space of like days or weeks and even a month, so much happens because it's growing quickly, and it's very, very hard for everybody to keep up.
Yeah.
Let's open up to a question before we do open mic. So
there is a question from Sandra in the chat asking us if we have a point of view on who's going to be in what place in the category. So Sandra, I'll summarize, I think, John, in my position, which is Amazon and Microsoft are in the pole positions, with Microsoft in the lead right now. Google really wants to be a player, but really is a search engine and doesn't really know how to serve corporate enterprises to anything like the degree that Amazon and Microsoft do. So those two are Godzilla and Mothra, in John's metaphor. Google would like to get into that ring and you can't count them out at this point. They have a lot of money. All these companies have a lot of money. And those three are going to be pushing everybody else around. there's going to be a lot of space for everything else. If this market is remotely the size it has potential to be, the Coheres, the AI 21 Labs, which seem tiny by comparison, they have hundreds of millions of dollars of investment and lots of customers already. And they may well be important players. Databricks, as we noted, those can be important players. They're going to shift around a lot. There are so many wildcards, as we were saying earlier, that order of magnitude improvements. If you remember the early days of search engines, the first search engine was Alta Vista. The second search engine was Yahoo. That all happened before Google was even founded, and Google ended up being the winner. So it's still early days, but you know, that's I think our viewpoint right at the moment.
It's really interesting. I actually had a field study team that looked at Alta Vista, and there's a woman there by the name of Sheraton Forbes who wanted to buy Yahoo and put those two together and dominate search, and she got demoted at for suggesting that. Anyway, but it's I think the another really important thing is a question about Grok over here that Valeriano asked. I think that's a really interesting wild card because they have a huge. First of all, they've got somebody who's willing to spend dough and really go at stuff, and has the dough. But in addition, he's got an unbelievable training set and so forth. I think that's a massive wild card. I think the other wild cards is what happens on the phone. All the major phone manufacturers are saying, hey, look, we're going to put large language capability at the edge. I think that when you have that, I mean, that's going to get interesting. And then I think the geopolitical, government's going to have to invest in stuff because this is going to be much more aggressive from a political and a power standpoint than search was, than even Facebook and social media was. So, I've got to believe, the EU is sitting there saying, golly, we don't really want to be running the American models. The Chinese don't have the technology to go down to 3 and 5 nanometers, but they're really trying to catch up there. I think Meta is going to play a really interesting thing because they screwed up on the metaverse, and they're going to turn around. They're open source and living daylights on this stuff, and IBM is is the shell of its former self. So I don't think they're anywhere to be found in this thing, but I think that Samsung's going to be really interesting, and there's going to be a lot of countries that are not going to want to be on the American models.
Yeah, I think particularly Europe is out in front of that right now. So that's why Mistral and Aleph Alpha are really important companies that probably we wouldn't consider if this was just an open market and nobody cared, but people do care and they're regulated. They care, not only they care, but there's teeth behind it. So if you're a financial service company in Europe, you generally are going to have a much harder time buying Microsoft and OpenAI than you're going to have buying Mistral or Aleph Alpha.
Sure.
Let's do a couple questions here. Go ahead, Bob, and then we'll go to JC. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Tim, this is for you. Comment and questions. So the comment is I put a triple exclamation mark on your Microsoft comment. In fact, I don't know if you saw it, but they just announced the deal with Oracle that their inferencing business is so large that they're offloading that with a partnership with Oracle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
and
just
going into the chip business too, because they just cannot get enough capacity right now. Yeah.
So sort of related to that, in addition to John's comment about Amazon being late, I would also say there in Google's investment in Anthropic, I'm wondering if it's an RIP situation because of OpenAI announcing 128,000 tokens. In other words, what value proposition is Anthropic with Claude bringing to the party? If it proves out that the testing of Claude 2 versus GPT-4 Turbo, if Turbo comes on top, I don't see why people would even go to AWS. I'm not writing off their cloud business, but they're operating from close to ground.
They're behind,
zero.
And I think they have an assumption. This is speculation. Have not talked to anybody. I have lots of friends at Amazon that I've chatted with a little bit, but not specifically about this. So this is no non-public information. I think they believe that the large-scale LLMs are going to be commodity faster than people think, and Anthropic will be good enough. And they don't have access to OpenAI. So they're going to go for Anthropic because they have access to it. And they are willing to pivot to open source. All of these, even Microsoft will host Anthropic if you want. If you just call them up, they'll say, sure, we'll host Anthropic. They're all cloud providers at the end of the day. So they're all kind of hedging their bets to a certain extent. But I think you're right. Early market capture, particularly in technology spaces, if you maintain innovation, is hard to stop. We gave the example of Google, but once Google got to critical mass, nobody came near them, and they continue to gain share. The only thing that might change is this new generation of technology, which might give Microsoft that. I mean, they're chewing away at a little bit of Google search, and it's got Google really scared right now. But that's because there's a new technology at play. In search, Google is completely dominant. And the question is, has OpenAI already reached the tipping point? I don't think so, but you can only tell that later from behind.
Go ahead, JC, why don't you go next, and we'll get open mic after this.
Thank you, Paul. Well, I have two questions. One of them is sort of a continuation of this conversation. I'm curious what you guys think Apple is up to when it comes to generative AI. And the second question is, did you look at the LLM in terms of the industry? So are there different players, key players, depending on whether you are in healthcare, for instance, which is the industry that I am in, versus e-commerce, versus telecoms, and so forth? So two different questions.
Well, I can start. The last question, there's going to be an enormous amount of domain-specific effort, whether it's fine-tuning an open LLM. I mean, Google did this early on with PalmMed and things like that. So that's going to happen a lot from a lot of these models. And that's the strategy of the Coheres and the AI 21s. They don't build open public models. They build custom models for a company or a domain. And so they're going to do a lot of that. I know the Mayo Clinic pretty well. They are building an LLM of their own. Okay, they're using, maybe they may start with somebody else's foundation model, but they're going to build their own, and they've said that publicly because they have, and again, to John's point, they have enormous data assets. They have so much medical data that they believe they can train their own LLM to be much more effective in the clinical environment than an OpenAI or a general purpose LLM. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. I've lost your first question. I'm sorry already. What was the first one?
Apple.
It was about what Apple's doing in the space.
Apple.
I shared a link
always
from
has an opinion on this. What do you let's
yeah, why don't you go ahead, Adam?
Go ahead, Julio.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, I was just going to say I shared a link in the chat to the Gen AI news we reviewed about iOS 18 this week. But if someone else wants to jump in and talk about it, I just wanted to bring people's attention to that.
No, but go ahead, Adam. What do you think?
Oh, I think Apple is keeping their cards held obviously extremely close to their chest. We have heard very little about what's going on, and it seems so obvious that they have the endpoints in this massive ecosystem. They also have the stack hardware and software top to bottom, and with Siri already out there in front, it's a no-brainer that they're going to be doing something big. And I think it's when it comes, we're probably not going to see it coming, and that's on purpose. That article is about iOS 18 and the anticipation, but that's still a year out. So we just have to wait and see, as best as I can tell.
JC, did that answer your question or start it?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's in the same position that I'm at. I can't wait to find out what they come up with.
Go ahead, Julio.
Oh, I was saying I agree with what Adam was saying. I think Apple just will announce something when it's ready. But I wanted to point out, or maybe ask, like OpenAI's announcements this week. I feel like they are a land grab for developers. And so we've been talking about people and their models and so on, but it's like these add-on features, like the ability, the GPTs are really just like a hosted RAG implementation that's easy for anybody to create. So even if you have a great LLM, do you have an easy way for somebody to create a RAG, a chatbot? And then the other big announcement this weekend on Monday, besides the technical advancements in chat in GPT-4, is the assistance, which is like an API to be able to create tools through OpenAI. And I feel like that is a big attempt to try to grab the developers and bring them into the OpenAI ecosystem. And so anybody who has an amazing new model, I think they're also going to have these APIs or these features or these capabilities for developers to want to switch from OpenAI to whatever they're doing. That's my feeling. So I wanted to get people's thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, and could I just add one other thing, JC, is if you're working in healthcare and any of these industries, I think now is the time to broker those data assets into a deep relationship with the provider, with the big provider. So either convince Microsoft or AWS or whomever that you're an essential partner for them owning that vertical, because this is such a talent constrained market. You know, you either got to be a massive customer of Microsoft to get their real attention, or you're just another schmo in the line. Or if you have a strategic data asset, you know, you can really get right at the top of the house there, and they're going to be throwing around money and volume of, you know, capacity to build those things out. And I'd do the same thing with the consulting providers, you know, because they're looking for lighthouse clients to show what can be done.
Go ahead, Alex, you're next.
Yeah. Thanks for calling on me. I was just wondering, how do you guys feel about the news that kind of went under the radar when it comes to OpenAI, especially with all the Dev Day stuff, with them kind of like, you know, trying to get Johnny Ive basically to work on OpenAI, and a lot of the rumors are they're going to be developing hardware and a phone. How does that change the landscape in the current battle grab for AI currently? And do you think that they could get any market share from Apple? And how does that like affect the landscape?
Well, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think that we've done a quick analysis of how much of the profitability and market capitalization of the world is in companies that are wins intensive, that is, are symbolic intensive. And we think it's over half. We think it's like 55% of market capitalization, about 51% of profitability. The reason I raise that is that unlike Google and Apple before, I think this is the heart of this thing is going to be an enterprise play. And the enterprise play is going to be massive dollars. And so my money's on AWS and Microsoft and that stuff in terms of really, you know, making that stuff work. So I hear you about Apple, but they're just an endpoint.
Well, to that point, then, you know, I think, look, Johnny Ive's great. He was great at Apple, but you have to remember the resources Apple had and the position they already had. He's a great industrial designer. Can OpenAI do anything about that? I'd be skeptical, honestly. You know, it's just when you have that much market share, I think the only people that could compete is like Samsung. Mike Novak posted in the chat the article about Samsung's LLM. That's worth looking into. Samsung could change the game in the mobile side of the business because they have enough phones out there to make a dent and to potentially shift something away from Apple. But Apple has such a dominant system, and they're so integrated into all of their services, their cloud services or other products, pretty tough to displace them. In the enterprise, maybe they could make some margin there. But I don't think, you know, Apple is a fast follower. They will just say, fine, we'll put OpenAI on our phone.
Go ahead. Thanks,
Can I
Alex.
just say one thing? I mean, Apple's like Disney. Disney hasn't invented anything since Walt died. Apple hasn't invented anything since Jobs died.
Yeah.
They've optimized to live in daylight, so what they have. Same thing with Disney, but they haven't come up with anything new.
RJ, go ahead, RJ.
Okay, so I just wanted to let everybody know about a really, really great chatbot that I've been using that you probably maybe haven't tried yet. It can really help you in these stressful times with ideation, coming up with ideas fast. It's at the bottom of your chat there, almost just above the Apple one, Apple Pay one. It's called PI.ai. It's put out by Inflection.ai, which was mentioned earlier before by the team. But I found that particular chatbot, especially with Voice 5, because it does audio, is really incredible for ideation, helping figure out ideas quick. Because when you're chatting it out with a conversational chatbot that can do such an amazing job, the way they've trained this model, it's actually competed very well in benchmarks, as you can see in their reports, compared to the other large models that actually beat them out in many ways. So highly recommend you try that out.
I have.
You like it too?
Good. I have.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
They're going to make a lot of hay because Reid Hoffman is a founder, and the guy from Google DeepMind, one of the founders of Google DeepMind, is the other founder, and they have $1 billion in capital, so they're not.
Yep.
Changed.
And I'm bringing it all to your attention because I think it's been flying under the radar, but it's really high performance, great for something that any other model can't do as well, nowhere near as well. If I was stuck on a desert island, that's the large language model that I would want.
But it was just released literally a few weeks ago, so it's new to the market.
No, it was released in like May, but they just released the audio part recently. I'm talking about pi.ai. It's by Inflection.
Yep.
It's their Inflection 1 model. Yeah, it was released in May, but it just the audio part is more recent though.
RJ, your passion for it states a lot, so I'm going to try myself.
You got to try this. You will be blown away. It's like totally amazingly great at conversation and figuring things out. It's really smart. I was having it help me teach me about detailed large language model stuff. It was able to pull up the technicalities like instantly.
That's great. Well, we're at yet another great meeting, so thank you, everyone. We'll put the pin in the meeting here. But thanks again for all the folks that
and Paul, before you end, on your meetups calendar, you got a couple of extra meetup meetings. They're like on Friday. Are they real or are they just like...
I have no idea. Maybe I made the mistake. I was deleting
okay.
the other day, but yeah, we have no meetings on Friday. And for some reason, a couple Mondays there were 2 of them.
Yeah, okay. I was just wondering about that. Thanks.
We do want to get back to that. We used to have one in Europe at 6 a.m. every Wednesday morning, and there's a lot of Europeans want us to get that going again. And I think after we get this report out a little bit, we'll look at bringing that back. Brian, you want to jump in before you be the last one before we finish?
Yeah, please. My check, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Yes, thank you. So I'm completely new to AI. I'm still a student in college. And first of all, thank you for the amazing insights for AI. So throughout the whole conversation, I think a lot of it is, mostly of it is focused on the tech part of it. But I was wondering, what do you guys personally think about like the moral issues, or do you guys see it as like an obstacle that's blocking the development of AI that's in your way, or how do you guys think you should balance it? And do you keep that in your mind when you're researching on AI?
I think we do. I certainly do. It's a complicated question to answer, especially in a minute because we're already late. But I think it's a real issue in the corporate world. Without regulation, they're just going to do what they do. Capitalism says if there aren't any rules, you just do what you're going to do. And there aren't any rules right now, significant rules. So that's why John was saying the new version from called Grok, the new LLM called Grok from Twitter is going to be different in terms of its quote unquote morality, which is a strange term to apply to a robot. And so those things are going to be important to pay attention to for corporations for a number of reasons. One is corporations do have sets of values, and they're going to be wanting to avoid conflicting those sets of values in public utterances by these robots. And so their reputation's at stake. So it's going to be fairly important, and it's a complex subject because it's not well understood how to control it. And there are already bad actors doing things to try and make them say things that you don't want them to say. So there's all sorts of complexities here, but I think it's a real issue.
So thank you, Brian. Great comment on the last one. We'll Ray, you want to sneak in here, Ray? We'll go.
Yeah, I'll just say on that last comment and the last question that was just asked, I have spent hundreds of hours just on that subject alone. And I have taken various subject matters that some people would not want to discuss ever anywhere, and others that are on the edge of what's okay to talk about based on who's in the room. And as you go to the different chat systems, GPT systems, they all have different levels of guardrails. I call it high rails versus medium size or low rails for what they will accept and won't accept. And I think what Tim was saying is as you go to the proprietary GPTs that are going to be in-house within corporates, they'll put in some very rigid high rails because they don't want any of their clients, customers, employees doing things, talking about things, discussing things that are just simply inappropriate. But when you look at the open source, true open source GPTs that are going to come out, they're going to have differences. I've taken various things, subject matters which we can't even talk about here, and I've put them onto different GPTs. And in some cases, I was shocked. It allowed me to do it. I could talk about just about any subject that I wanted to, and it would help me make it even more interesting and more embellished. But yet, if I did it in ChatGPT, even one word, it would give me the red flag saying, sorry, we're not going to allow you to talk about that. So,
Ray, do you see a world where we're going to morph into pro-life and pro-choice large language models, Sunni and Shiite large language models?
yes, all that, absolutely, because you're dealing with different societies, different ways of life, different religions, all kinds of things come into play, ethnic groups, and then various corporate structures where you've got small businesses and then you've got the large businesses. So what is okay here is not okay there. And I think that could be the case, that this whole GPT thing, OpenAI, is indeed, as you've been talking about, very new, only in the last year and a half. It's like the internet, it's in its early stages. And so there is a need for everyone to understand what in the world have we got here? How can we use it? And then, oh my God, look, it's capable of doing this, it's capable of doing that. The different authors and developers of the various GPTs, various even open sources that are going to start showing up, they're all going to wind up saying, well, we better have these guardrails, we want to have these guardrails, and potentially legislation will come into play, and legislations from various countries, and they will say, we don't care who you are, what your GPT is, what your AI is, you cannot do this, whatever that is. That's the old story. How can you kill the most amount of people in a building quickest? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there'll be certain people, certain legislations that will come out with different countries saying, we don't care what you're doing, but you are not going to be able to do that. And then the different players will have it in different ways. So it's a big subject. It's a huge subject.
Ray, thank you so much. I don't minimize the importance of the subject. I'm just sensitive to time. So thanks, everyone.
Right.
We'll end here. And another good meeting as usual. We'll get this posted on YouTube in the next day or so. Thank you, everyone.